Hello and welcome to the ZACP. My name is Ramon Kavanagh. Apparently, I'm live. Let me just mute the video. There it is. So, yeah, tomorrow is election day, and what can I say? It's been a very, very busy 7 weeks or so. I mean, that's how old the party is, which is quite something. We left it late on purpose to make the most impact, and it looks like it will pay off. So, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to start looking at your questions. So, the first one, how many votes do you think you'll realistically get, considering that most citizens don't even know the ZACP exists? Well, that is true. Most citizens do not know that the ZACP exists, for the very simple reason that we are not a very tech-savvy country. A lot of people do not have internet. And since the internet is our primary form of communication, it's obvious that not everyone will know about us. But we're not the type of party to, just throw shit against the wall and see what sticks. Sorry, it's a bit warm here. We had a very targeted campaign. We went after people who would agree with our ideas, i.e., taxpayers, i.e., members of the gun community, things like that. It was a very surgical campaign. It wasn't just to spread things everywhere and hope someone bites. So, in terms of how many votes we can realistically get, we're going for 450,000. I mean, we won 10 seats in parliament. It is possible. Can we get it? Yes. Will we get it? I don't know. There's no polling data on us because we're too new for that. So 10 seats will be ecstatic. I think 5 seats will be very, very good considering the time. So between 3 to 6 seats will be very, very good. But we want 10. How are you going to, sorry, those are my pugs. I hope they don't cause too much commotion. How are you going to respond to those crazy people in parliament who will say your party isn't gender diverse enough? We don't care about gender diversity because we don't care about identity politics. We care about people who like the principles, and the principles are what binds everyone to the party, not identity. So in terms of starting the party, we spoke to quite a lot of people to come join us. Many declined. Many thought we were too optimistic. Many had good jobs and didn't want to leave. Many had other obligations, and that's fine. But we're not to worry about, representation, as they call it. We're only there to make sure that our principles and our plans get through Parliament. Excuse me. Next question, Leslie asks, in the event of a coalition, what principles would be pushed as a priority, if any? Well, all 10 of them, because they're all linked together, Leslie. So, I mean, liberty is the first one. So if a policy broadens or strengthens liberty, we will certainly, go into that policy proposal. But if any sort of policy or coalition deal is done with people who don't accept our principles, we just won't do it. Then we'll just go on policy by policy basis. Because remember, a lot of people in parliament are there to draw salaries, and they're not too worried about budgets, and they're not too worried about principles. For them, it's a job. They middle management, essentially. If we can go in there with principles and plans to make their job easier, because we already got the plans and we have the policies, just a case of implementation, you could influence quite a lot of people through that. So the goal is really to increase the viability of the policies, make sure people understand them, and that people know that when they approach us, their plan needs to have those principles in mind. So we're not going to have hard, fast coalitions. We will probably do a policy by policy proposal, irrespective of which party, of course. If we do not score enough votes to get into parliament, will you keep the party alive? Yeah, absolutely. I think we will get enough votes to get into parliament, to be honest. But if we don't, in a happenstance that we don't, we will keep the party alive. That is for sure. Because if we do get into parliament, we can really, really grow very, very quickly with more budget and things like that. If we don't get to Parliament at all, we can reorganize, rearrange things, and be ready for maybe the municipal elections in what, 3 years, 2.5 years from now. And if we can grow from the municipal elections from a constituency to a national constituency, that is an option as well. But I really think we will get representation in Parliament. That is for sure. So, next questions. Are there any plans in place to try to dismantle the labor aristocracy? So, for those who don't know what it is, the labor aristocracy is basically big business, big government, and big unions sort of colluding together to create a protected working class that are, protected by minimum wage laws, by a terrible education system, and by labor regulations. So there's about 10 to 12 million workers in the country, but there are 10 to 15 workers who could, take their jobs essentially, but they can't because they are terribly educated or they, do not form part of the labor aristocracy as such. So in terms of ending it, you really have to dismantle their political power, and that means deregulating the labor law. I don't know how many people in Parliament would want to do that. I assume the ANC and the EFF will not want to do that at all. So it's a long-term goal rather than a plan we intend to solve right now. We have to keep our priorities in check in this case. It's not a case of going in and trying to do what we want. There are many, many factors to consider, especially if the two biggest parties, want to keep the labor aristocracy. So what is your approach to dismantling BEE? Well, you just need to repeal the laws at the end of the day. It won't happen while the ANC is in power. It won't happen while ANC and EFF are working together. So it's a long-term game at the end of the day. A very important point here. If you get into Parliament, it's not about just, a seat at the table. It's about your ideas being amplified in society. It gives your ideas legitimacy. So, as I said a while ago, you can stay outside of the tent, and just shout and scream, and nothing much will happen. But if you're inside the tent and you can change and influence and make sure that your ideas get amplified in corporate media and alternative media and things like that, the fact that you're an MP or in Parliament, it gives your ideas a lot more substance, essentially. So that is one of the reasons why we want to get into Parliament, is to create, make our views more palatable and more widely spread across South Africa. And because a political party does it, the media writes about it. If it's a union or a civil society organization, the media don't care too much. The media loves politicians and they love politics. So that's why we are trying to get into Parliament, to make sure our ideas are spread to a wider audience. How will you convince unions to abandon the minimum wage? Sure, all right. I don't think they can be at all, because that keeps them in power. Every time the minimum wage is increased, they take credit for it, of course, and it protects the labor aristocracy as such. Once again, long-term game, guys, very long-term. The next 5 years is essentially about stopping the Venezuelification of South Africa. That is very, very important. Once the ANC loses the popular vote, hopefully by 2024, coalitions come into effect. And through coalitions, parties like us have a lot more leverage to use to make sure that coalitions are aligned to various principles that we like. So these are all very long-term games. The short-term games are the 10 plans on our website. Those are cheap, simple, and effective. Everyone sort of agrees that we need to solve school toilets, that we need to solve the tourist visa debacle. Those are short, simple, and effective solutions to those problems. And once we fix those, we'll pick another 10 to fix. But while we're fixing those, we use our influence in media and in parliament to let the other MPs know who may not know about minimum wage and the effects on the labor market, right? Some of them really don't know, but we let them know. These ideas are making people unemployable. These ideas are giving people a terrible education. No one wants a terrible education for people. They want a good education. So our idea is X, Y, and Z. Would you support us? And if you have face to face with people, you can really sort of change the game in that way. Interesting questions. Do you think you'll end up fighting most of your battles using the legal system or parliamentary process? It depends on the battle. So our 10 plans are all about parliament. It's all about making sure that our plans are set in motion, that, the plans that are cheap, simple, and effective, they can fix real problems right now. Those are all parliamentary processes. To me, the legal system is really the last resort because you sort of need to enter the battle of ideas in a sense, where you have to say that what are the ideas that we want in a society and how can we strategically place them and amplify them in a society as well. If you go to court straight away, you're sort of losing the battle of ideas because then now you're bound by precedents, essentially. That's what Agri-SA did with mineral rights. So they went to court because the government wanted to nationalize mineral rights. They went to court and they fought against it, and the Constitutional Court found against Agri-SA. So now the law is that mineral rights belong to the state, and the Court has accepted that argument, and there's a stamped court order stating that. So now that issue is off the table completely, thanks to people going to court instead of fighting it in media and the battle of ideas generally. So we're not a fan of going to court to solve problems. We believe in dialogue, we believe in debate, and we believe in influence. Why do all of your plans entail enacting more legislation? They don't really. It's actually about undoing legislation. For example, like the visa thing, right? So currently we have our own visa regime, tourist visa regime. All we have to do on our plan is to plug into the American and the EU visa regime, essentially, which they will gladly give to us, by the way. It happens already across the EU, and it happens between Mexico and America. They have a visa regime that is American. And so we're actually doing away with legislation in that case. Same with the school toilets. There's reams of paper about school toilets and how to solve it. We just want a simple policy right here. It's not about enacting more legislation at all. It's actually about removing a lot of legislation. So next question. My main concern with voting for newcomers like your party is how much power and influence you're realistically going to have in parliament. So that's from Eagle in the Sky. Well, Eagle, I mean, your question is a very sort of short-term answer question. Short-term, who knows? We have a strategy, we have a plan, we can work with other parties to get things done. We know that we can. So short-term, we can get a few things done, don't get me wrong. But short-term, we can stop a lot of new things from being done, like the NHI, like expropriation without compensation, like the nationalization of the Reserve Bank. Long-term, the next election and the one after that, we can have a real sense of influence and power as we grow as a party. These are just the first few steps. This is a very, very long-term game and something that we are well aware of. We're not there we're there to solve 10 problems right now, but there's a very, very long-term game at hand here. And they can only be played once we get seats in Parliament at this stage. So, keep getting told that a vote for the ZACP is a wasted vote. Let's say that you don't get enough votes for a seat. Doesn't that prove the wasted vote statement true? That's on the assumption we don't get a seat, which is almost impossible at this stage. So if you look at the 2014 elections, there were 150,000 votes that were wasted, i.e. the parties that got them didn't get a seat. So those were wasted votes. That amounts to about 6 extra seats in parliament out of 400, right? So assuming everyone voted for the DA instead of those other smaller, wasted parties, the DA would have received 6 extra seats. What material difference could it have done for the DA to get 6 extra seats? I'm sure they'll argue the point that they could have, more people in committees and all sorts of things. But it's not a lot of seats, essentially. It's 6 seats. It's, what, 2 times Cope. It's not a lot of seats. So you can waste your vote if someone doesn't get a seat. But more importantly, it doesn't mean that that vote would have gone to the official opposition. And I think the DA has sort of taken for granted that minorities will vote for them. And I think that's not a very good thing on their behalf. You shouldn't take votes for granted at all. So, Eagle asks, a great many people in SA have been convinced that capitalism is bad. How are you going to convince them otherwise? Once we get into parliament, we use that influence to amplify our ideas. People, if you really talk to people, a lot of people are just capitalists. They just don't call it that. They say, I'm a plumber, or I'm a taxi driver, or I'm a shebeen owner, or a hawker. But if you say you provide value to other people for money, or you charge money for a product, you're a capitalist. You are doing things for your benefit while providing value to people that are not your family, to the community at large. People are capitalists. We just need to tell them they are capitalists and convince them that they are capitalists. And that's not terribly difficult to do. Excuse me. How are you going to include? Oh, sorry, I missed the. How are you going to include non-tech voters? Well, across the metropolitan areas this week and last week, our posters have gone up. We've got a hell of a lot of media attention. We've written over 30 articles in various platforms. We've been interviewed roughly about 25 to 35 times on various platforms as well. So there's a lot of work being done, not just on social media, a lot of work being done in the background about going for interviews, writing articles, making sure that our pieces are displayed prominently on News 24 or the Daily Maverick or Politics Web. That's where we fight the battle of ideas, essentially. And so the people who read those publications know about us as well. So about the fourth industrial revolution, what is the ZACP doing internally to automate the processes? Oh, Rowan, that's a very difficult question. So for the moment, we haven't automated much, if I'm honest with you. We're all hands on deck at the moment. Once remember, we're only 7 weeks old. And we started off late on purpose to get as much press coverage as possible, which has happened. Once we get our seats and once we are in parliament, once we have a bit of time to not campaign, we will certainly automate that. And I mean, for the fourth industrial revolution in terms of government, just look at Estonia. They basically got a digital government. If you want a passport, you order it online. There's an open register for land. The public knows who owns what land. If you want a resident visa, you can do so online as well. Same for driver's licenses, same for lodging of company documents. Estonia is really, really good in this regard. They're the first sort of digital government, and that is something really worth looking at. What is the ZACP's view on environmental issues and conservation as a whole? Well, a rich country protects its environment. Really, really simple. So to protect the environment, we need to become richer. If you look at the devastation that the USSR and a few other communist states did to the environment, it's horrific. And China before 1978, before they became capitalist. But here's the thing: can the government really do anything about the environment? In essence, I don't know if they can. I know billionaires who've bought hundreds and thousands of hectares of the Amazonian rainforest to just leave it there so that no one can exploit it. And in South Africa, there's a very good example. The Shobeleni, I think that's how you say it, community in the Eastern Cape. Now they're fighting with Gwede Mantashe and a mining firm because Gwede wants the mining firm to get the land to exploit the minerals and all that. If the community had property rights, they could very well just say no, and the mining firm can't exploit the land and pollute rivers and things like that. Property rights gives ownership, and as an owner, you have a lot of protections against these sort of things generally. So always remember, capitalism is about scarce resources, and you need the resources to be able to make money. So, destroying the environment for a quick profit is, yeah. First of all, A, it doesn't make too much sense in this connected world, and B, people find out very quickly and make different choices if they know that about you. So, but most importantly, rich society cares more about the environment than a poor one. So Dylan asks, any parliamentary committee that you're specifically looking for? The finance and the police are the ones that are most important to me. Police, notably because of the gun rights issues and all the problems they are having with the central firearms registry. So what we want to do in the police is there's already DA people on board. There's already EFF, VF Plus members of that committee rather, and they are generally pro gun right in terms of they just want the legislation to work properly. So far, it's not working properly. If we can tinker with the legislation in the committee with buy-in from the other parties, we can make a big difference to sorting out the gun licensing issue rather quickly. And finance, because hell, budgets, we need to see what the government's spending money on. Do you think land expropriation or compensation will happen? It's difficult to make predictions here, but I think they will try to make it happen. But I think they will be quite unsuccessful, only because they've been rather unsuccessful at doing most other things, in the sense that there's been a lot of remember Rob Davies put in a law or wanted to put a law in where you had to license every single business in a street or in a city or something like that. Huge outcry that it was shelved completely. There's been a lot of laws that they try to pass that just don't pass. So EWC, I think they'll pass the law, so to speak, but in actual fact, I don't know how much impact they can have on the ground if people don't comply with it, because there's no real army to speak of. The police are inept. So yeah, there's a difference between a law being passed and it having an effect. I think it'll be a terrible effect if they pass the law, but in practice, I'm not too sure how they're going to enforce it. They've always had a problem with that. Free education, what's your stance? Nothing in life is free. You're not entitled to someone else's labor for free. That's called slavery. I think education needs to start being changed from primary school rather than tertiary education. And the reason why a lot of people go into tertiary education, very important, because minimum wage and labor laws have made the, what do you call those, artisans have made artisans and internships basically illegal. So if you wanted to be, if plumbers used to have 4 or 5 interns and they would pay them very little for a year, but that internship was about gaining skills and upskilling yourself as a prospective plumber. With minimum wage and labor regulations, whereby you have to employ someone fully as an employee within 6 months and pay them R3,500 a month, plumbers will get, 1 intern for R3,500 rather than 3 interns for R1,000 a month. So a lot of people have felt that those options aren't available to them. So what they've done is go to tertiary education, which is fair, because that's the only place where there are jobs to be had. I think in terms of graduates, 6% are unemployed, as opposed to the average being 30% nationally. So, if you get a degree, you probably will find a job somewhere, but we just don't have the resources and the universities for that. Because universities are essentially still a sort of publicly funded state utility. So it was up to me. I would really decentralize universities and have a lot more of them, have private education. So you have your Bostons and your Damlins, but they're not allowed to call themselves universities. It's a very privileged, protected name. But I would be very much like a USA. I would have a university in every town. And they can offer various things. So the best medical university is this one in Cape Town, and the best BA one is this one in the Northwest. And people naturally choose the ones that they will go to, rather than having, I think we have 6 at the moment, and no plans to create any new ones. So how can someone who doesn't live in a major city where your party is concentrated get involved post-elections where you only focus on the major metros? There's a very important part of focusing on the major metros, because basically 65% of South Africans live in metros, and we are still rapidly urbanizing. So every year, a lot more people move to the metros than stay in rural areas. So the future is urban voters, essentially. And we're going to focus on that. The ANC has a rural voter base already. So for us, it's a huge opportunity cost to travel town to town and speak to people directly, but is it worth our while? Or is it better just to focus on the urban voters who keep increasing every year due to semigration? So for the moment, we'll work on major metros, but we will most certainly have branches in various rural areas. If people decide to take the ZACP and want to spread the word, then we'll gladly go there. As an MP, would you accept payments for trolling the ANC, DA, and EFF? David, I don't need payment for that. I'll do that for free. Have you had any meetings with other political parties? So I met Mr. Lekota about 3 weeks ago. We didn't talk about anything in particular. It was weird. He invited me to the meeting, so I went, had a good coffee with his team, and he was sort of like reminiscing about the past and talking about the importance of the Constitution and things like that. I think it was more of a case of him wanting to find out who I was. I spoke to him before on the Renegade Report about 6 months ago, and I think he didn't realize it was me that was part of the ZACP, but we had a very good conversation. Nothing about coalitions, nothing about, nothing about politics as such. It was more of him reminiscing about the past and how important the Constitution was. And it was a great pleasure to see him again in a more casual atmosphere. But that's all. I haven't spoken to anyone else from any other party. So, what is the practical difference between group rights and individual rights? Well, that is simple. So, very important. A society is made up of individuals. So if you look at our constitution, it's every South African individual rights. So an empowered individual has all the rights, that are given to them living under a constitution like ours. People are poor because they don't have rights. People are poor because they don't have property rights, like in tribal areas. They don't have their rights to education has been severely infringed because they've got poor education. So people are poor because they don't have rights, not because they don't have resources. That's a very, very important distinction. But if you're an individual who is empowered, feel free to create your own groups with your own ideology, with your own ethnicity, religion. That's what people do anyway. If you look at churches, stokvels, community centers, neighborhood watches, any sort of human rights group, that's what people do. They just join like-minded people and solve a problem or create awareness for a cause. So, but those groups shouldn't have rights at all, because it's just the aggregation of individuals with rights. So essentially, you're still stuck with individuals with rights, because groups can't have rights in essence under the Constitution. You can only have individual rights, and that's why we say individual rights before group rights, even though group rights don't really exist in a material sense. A lot of people think they exist, but they don't really. So people tend to believe that we need government intervention to help young Black entrepreneurs. Can you help explain how free markets achieve this more effectively? Well, here's the thing about young entrepreneurs. The ANC has done this really, really well. They've sort of become like a state bank to a lot of young entrepreneurs. So, whereas, in fact, I mean, a good example of free markets and entrepreneurship is the taxi industry that arose out of nowhere. There's no policy created by the governments or bureaucrats, excuse me, to create it. And it just fulfilled the need, and that's essentially what it is. So for any entrepreneur, it's very important. You have to create value to others. That's how you get rewarded for the work that you do. And a value means providing something they can't make themselves or solving the issue they can't do themselves. And the free trade between individuals, that's the free market. And people do this every single day. You go to townships, there's spaza shops everywhere. There's people that repair shoes, cobblers, as we call them. There are people that provide nursery schools. There are people that provide bread, people that provide haircuts. All this is a free market. So it's already happening in front of millions of people in the world. But they don't see that as free market capitalism. They just see it as getting money for a service. We just need to tell them that is capitalism, and they are partaking in it. And then you're just giving a name to something they're already doing, in essence. So, how will the ZACP ensure purity in their philosophical approach as a party grows? I mean, our principles can't be changed according to our constitution without like a 75% vote within the party. So far, the party is made up of 10 people and no one else for the moment. And our constitution ensures that the 10 people currently present in the party can't really be replaced until the next election. And the reason for that is once we get into parliament, we show the world and any potential new members how popular we are getting through these principles and how important these principles are in the South African political ether, so to speak. We are very pure in terms of principles. I know a lot of people say that, but we are not growing for the sake of growing. We are growing if people agree with us and agreeing with our principles. We're not going to do a DA and dilute the principles to get more support because we don't believe that we should ever run this country. We will be an important factor in coalitions or something like that, but we don't want to be in charge of the entire country at all. We just want to provide a sort of binary, strongly principled stance for anyone who needs us, and to work with them to maybe run the country in a decade or two. So, first time entering politics, what do you think will be your biggest individual challenge? If I'm really honest, I think it's going to be the opposition MPs, those people that you see on TV sleeping or cutting their toenails while there's a speech on or whatever, doing their hair. Because let us not forget, most MPs are not at all principled people. They never had a job in their life, other than a few of them. They've been an MP for maybe over a decade or two. It's a very comfortable position to be in. And you get lazy and bored, and it's a job. And I think to sort of reinvigorate them and to make sure that they are public servants and they're doing this for the public people rather than just for themselves or their party, I think that's going to be that's going to be like our biggest frustration, especially me, because I don't have a lot of patience. But the biggest strength, which is the next question, is that we have principles, and on a day-to-day basis, I fulfill the needs of my clients. So I have 1,000 bosses. Every client is a boss. So I know what it means to work for someone. I know what it means to have a balance sheet. I know what it means not to have enough money at the end of the month to pay for things. I know what it means to to do projecting cash flow and things like that, how to work with people that I don't really particularly like, but they are my clients, so I have to fulfill the services as agreed upon. And that will be our biggest strength as well. That's sort of negotiating that we can do in Parliament that we do in our private businesses. Anyway, for the municipal vote, who is most aligned with the ZACP principles? Personally speaking, based on the manifestos, I think VF Plus, Freedom Front Plus, they sort of still think group rights and they still think minority rights, which I don't think exist either. But as a general manifesto, I think they are the closest to us in that sense. So them or COPE. For me personally, the problem with COPE is they are far too obsessed with the Constitution. I think there are a few issues with the Constitution. But in terms of people who are incorruptible and people who are really have the best interests of the country at heart, COPE. So COPE or Freedom Front Plus. I'm still deciding between the two for my provincial vote, if I'm honest with you. What is the ZACP's view on the unitary state with federalistic qualities? Well, if I'm really honest, I want to devolve as much power to the local level as possible, very much like Switzerland. So in Switzerland, you have a canton system, i.e., little provinces, and your taxes are used within your canton, and they tell you what your taxes are being used on, and they have direct democracy. So if you get, I think it is 100,000 votes or signatures for a petition, every other canton sort of has to vote on your petition. And if there's enough cantons that vote on your petition, it could become a law in Switzerland. And I think that's fantastic. I think that's really, really great. In South Africa, our constitution doesn't really allow that. But I do think that on various interpretations, you can give the provinces a hell of a lot more responsibilities. But most importantly, the municipalities a hell of a lot more responsibilities. Like in America, the municipality decides who's the police captain at the local police station. And those sort of things, you can really go to a local level. And I think that's really bipartisan. I think many people in the EFF might agree with that, giving more power to local municipalities. So who knows what we can do? We'll see. Are you lobbying big business for support? No, not in the slightest. We think big business is sort of part of the problem, to be honest. A lot of them are cronies. Sorrel has many friends who are CEOs of many, many big JSE listed companies. So they won't support us at all. I know quite a lot of them support Cyril because he's one of them, which isn't necessarily true. But no, we're not lobbying big business for support. We'd rather get support from ordinary people, ordinary entrepreneurs who are trying to make a day to day and who have small businesses. Because the real innovation is happening at a small business level, not at the big corporates. Opinion on BEE. I think it's racist. I think it's nefarious. I think it doesn't help anyone, let alone the BE appointee. And I would repeal all of it if I could tomorrow. If you're going to break the labor aristocracy, you have to engage unions. Will you focus on members or leadership? You always focus on members. You never go for the leaders. The leaders are the ones that call the shots based on the members, what the members want. If you influence the members, you influence the leaders. How many packs of cigarettes do I smoke a day? None. I actually have this voice because I was burnt as a child. So you can see my bicep over there, skin grafts here, skin grafts over here. Basically an accident, fire accident. And I had smoke inhalation for about 30 seconds. So my vocal cords are irreparably, is that the word? Are just damaged and they can't be fixed. So that's why I sound like this. Any aim to consult with people like Manus Broderick? I have sent him an email. We are corresponding. I think once we get a few seats, we will certainly meet. Are you going to be chief whip, Ramon? I don't know. Maybe the chairman wants that position. I think Camden will be the chief whip, if I'm honest with you. But we really haven't even looked at that. We're very not we're not a hierarchical party. We're very sort of all equal on the same level. So we'll have a debate about it when the time comes. So to gain more votes at the next election, you have to engage the masses. I don't know if you technically have to engage the masses in the sense of, how can I explain this? You sort of have to engage with the influential people within the masses. And then you create a tyranny of the minority. And for those who don't know, read Nicholas Taleb wrote a great essay called "The Tyranny of the Minority" or "The Dictatorship of the Minority." It's on the internet for free, and it's well worth your time. It's the reason why we eat halal food. If you look at our food from Pick and Pay or wherever, most of it is halal, and it's not because we want halal food. It's because Muslim people deeply care about halal food. But someone like me who's not Muslim, I don't care about halal food. So if Muslims are, say, 1 billion people in South Africa, Pick and Pay will look and say, okay, look, 1 million people really care about halal, whatever, 20 million don't. So the easiest thing, instead of having two different processes, halal or non-halal, we'll just make everything halal. Because those who care about halal already care. Those who don't care about halal don't care about halal. So you actually please the 1 million Muslims, and everyone eats halal, but they don't really care. But the Muslims really care. It's a very, very interesting concept. And I recommend you read the piece. It's on the internet. The Dictatorship of the Minority is the name of the piece, as far as I'm aware. Are you going in Parliament in purple overalls or t-shirts? And no, I'm a big fan of suits, actually. I love wearing suits. I'm just not wearing one today because I'm at home and not seeing clients. But normally I would wear suits. What is the ZACP's greatest philosophical weakness? Naivety, maybe? Romanticism? Belief that principles matter? Um, we won't know right now. We will know once the election is done and what people say about us after the fact. And maybe we are very naive, but I think our principles are universal and people intuitively know that they are good. Oh, now he feels horrible that he said I have a bad voice. No, please. I don't really care. Don't feel sorry. What is the ZACP stance on immigration? Well, excuse me, let me just clear my throat. So here's the thing. If you ask me personally, I'm a sort of open borders kind of guy. Well, I used to be, and then I changed my mind a little bit. So in South Africa, I think what we really need to do is replace the brain drain. So if you look at, there's been 1.5 million people that have immigrated since 1994, most of them educated, most of them professionals. They are not getting replaced. So what we need to do is ensure that qualified people get into the country a lot easier to work and to provide value to the communities and things like that. If you look at something like the Health Professions Council of South Africa, they actually sort of don't allow doctors with an international degree to really practice here. Was at least very, very, very difficult. And that's ridiculous. That's just xenophobia in my eyes. And that needs to change. But generally, borders must be, kept and monitored. If you are skilled, it should be very easy to get a work permit and very easy to get you working and providing value to others. All right, I got 5 more minutes. I've already done this for 45 minutes. Okay, I got 5 more. What principle of the ZACP do you feel least comfortable with? None, because I sort of helped develop them, if I'm really honest with you. I agree with every single one of them. Let me just double check. So while I'm here, let me look at our principles while I'm here. Private property rights, rule of law, right to work, the right to be secure on your own property, free markets based on enlightened self-interest. That's the one myself and the chairman debated. We went with So, like personally, I wouldn't buy goods from a country that commits human rights violations. But if it makes, where am I? But that's the only one. If I'm really honest with you, but the argument is very sound. So sorry, I'm just trying to get back to the Q&A so I can see the questions I logged up by mistake. Right. Okay. So I'll take. Geez. Okay. There's 5 questions. I'll take all of them and answer them very quickly. Long-term view on the correct role of the government. The government has like 3 or 4 things to do: maintain borders, enforce contracts, create a justice system, and enforce the law, essentially. So to me, everything else is superfluous and shouldn't be entered into. It's not there to regulate industries. It's not there to create minimum standards. It's not there to say who or what can be done, what can be used on the human body, like drugs or not. So long term, the correct role of the government is ready to stay out of people's lives and ensure that their freedom is protected from other people and themselves. But it's very rare that it's protected from themselves. Do you believe traditional leaders should remain custodians of the land? No, not at all. So we have a policy about 20 million title deeds by 2020. We've divided up, excuse me, we've used AI and Google Maps to map out tribal areas and state-owned land. And we figured out that we could give 20 million people the title deeds to the land that they already live on. And that will mean that the traditional leaders will not be custodians of the land at all. Doesn't mean that they should not exist. If people want them, they are more than welcome to keep the traditional leaders, but on the terms of the people that support them, not on the terms of state fiat protecting them. All right, another one about capitalism. How are we going to educate people? We will convince them they are actually capitalists because they are. Fixing the police, well, we got one plan to make sure that people who are numerate and literate should be policemen. So tertiary education or a police college, something like that. And our long-term plan is to decentralize the police, make it more contextual, make sure that the training is contextual as well. So solving farm murders and rural crime is different from solving urban crime. So if you have a decentralized police system, you can train people to work best in the context where they are based. So if provinces and excuse me, so if provinces and municipalities and towns have their own police station and they can elect their station commander and things like that, I think that will give a lot more credence to the police and make sure that standards are kept. Oh, the chairman's on. Send me the link. Okay, hold on. I think he wants to join us. Let me invite him on quickly. Give me 1 second. Right, I think the chairman is going to join us now. Maybe he can take over because I actually got sort of work to do, if I'm honest. It's gone on a bit longer than I expected. So let me just see if I can answer a few more questions while I'm here. How long will it take to fix the economy? Wait, Dean, that is $1 million answer. I have no idea. A long time. Depending on who's in power at any given stage. Hold on, let me just add Catherine on here. Oh, there you go, invited. So it may take a very long time. Just know that it won't really get better under ANC or EFF government. That's for sure. So once the ANC loses power, it could take, then we can actually start to improve it. But while they're in power, we will be there just to ensure that it doesn't get worse. Right. Is socialism a policy to protect predators? predators need to take because they can't produce themselves. I think socialism is about power, if I'm honest. And I think predators, the correct term is parasites. So socialism is about a powerful cabal of people controlling the means of production and telling everyone else what to do with them. So it's a terrible creed, has failed everywhere, and people still believe in it. If you look at the ANC and the National Democratic Revolution, they still really, really, really believe in it. Ironically, if you say National Democratic Revolution in Russia, they will just laugh at you and say, "We tried this already. It doesn't work very well." And anyone who tries to, do it today in 2019 is just mental. But yeah, all right. So is Camden actually coming? Oh, sorry about that. My microphone fell. How do you fix corruption in the police force? Through technology, I suppose. Corruption is a very tough thing to break down. Hold on, sorry. I'm sorry. Link is broken. I don't know why link is broken. Oh, sorry, everyone. Let me just try to get the chairman on here. That should work. Corruption is it's a very tough thing to solve unless you change the standards and the accountability thereof. I don't have an answer for you, I'm afraid, in terms of how to solve corruption. But if, for example, as a traffic cop, you caught with a bribe, there's a minimum sentence of 10 years. And now special courts to fast track your prosecution. That would make it stop rather easier. So next one, is a weak ANC more dangerous than a strong one? No, I think a weak ANC is actually, how can I explain, more dangerous to itself. So if the ANC is weak, they're not able to implement policy in any meaningful way. Some aspects of that ANC will want to go the EFF route. Some won't. There's different factions in the ANC. So a weaker ANC might actually give Ramaphosa the balls to actually say, let's partner up with the DA, let's focus on economic growth, and the rest of you, I don't really care. Sort out your own things, go with the EFF. If you want to, I'm going to go with the DA and focus on economic growth. That would be an interesting scenario. I think a strong ANC actually is far more dangerous because the person in charge of the ANC is Ace Magashule. He's what would you call it, a Zupta. But yeah, I think, Canton's here. Hey, Mr. Chair.
Yes, I certainly am. And I thought this would be an interesting exercise. I pulled
How
over.
can you hear a thing?
You cannot hear a thing. That's fascinating.
Are you muted?
Unmute the microphone. And no, it certainly doesn't appear as though you're in a position to hear me.
Hold on.
Yeah, no, it certainly doesn't look as though the microphone is working. So you keep talking. I'll be right back.
Oh, so you guys can hear Canton. I can't. Well, now he's muted and he's on his phone in his car. I don't know what he's doing. So as I was saying, a weak ANC is actually better for the country, in my personal opinion, because if it's below 50%, it can't make up 2/3 with the EFF. And I think there will be far less reason to stick together than a very strong ANC. If you have a strong ANC, there's more incentive for them to stick together and to actually get Ramaphosa out, if I'm really honest with you. So sorry, I'm just waiting for my chairman to join me. So yes, we will quit our jobs if we get the seats. That is for sure.
Although technically speaking, quitting a job is a bit of
It's
a
weird. Everyone else can hear you except for me. I'm not too sure why.
So everyone else is able to hear me. That's fascinating. Really?
Let's see if I unplug this. Is he chat? I can't hear you.
Yeah, I actually don't think that people are in fact able to. Um,
Now,
yeah, I certainly don't think that people are able to actually hear me, unless you're saying that it's actually working on your side.
so now I can hear you fine when I unplug my microphone.
Fascinating. Okay.
It is.
But excellent. Well, but again, going back to the question of what you were just mentioning in terms of the ANC and a weak ANC versus a strong ANC,
Yes.
we have the conversation that you were having with Jonathan Witt around whether an ANC below 50% is better than an ANC above 50%. And I think you two were of the view that an ANC below 50% is not good because it gives more power to Julius. Actually, my view is that if the ANC is below 50%, there are two possible scenarios. The one possible scenario, of course, is that they need the support of Julius to get legislation passed. The other thing is that they might need the support of ourselves to get legislation passed, on the assumption that we've got a balance of power of 3 or 4 seats that might swing a vote in their direction. So, in other words, when their policies actually align with us, there's a greater incentive for them and if we actually believe the story that people like Praveen Gordhan, as an example, actually have the best interests of the country at heart, then in that scenario, if Praveen tries to pass a budget, or I don't know whether he'll be finance minister, but if Tito Mboweni tries to pass a budget that actually broadly ties in with our objectives, it gives us greater leverage. What do you think?
No, that's actually a very good point. I yet have to see the ideologies sort of merging together. But if, for example, Cyril's able to make a few moves and appointed the cabinet that is fairly pro-business and reformist in nature, absolutely, we have far more leverage than other parties in this regard.
Yes, and I'm now no longer in a position to access the rest of the questions, so I don't know if there's any of the others that you want me to take.
So it seems like most people have sort of left, so they can hear us. Everyone says they can hear you, which is great. But no, the last real question was about the weak ANC below 50% and what's our scenario on that.
Yes.
But there's still 64 people watching. So if you have a few questions, post them before I go. Catherine is here to answer them. And just in case you didn't know, tonight we are going to have our final event, which I'll post in the chat right now. It's at the Rank Club. We will live stream it, and we hope that we can actually see you there. It'll be fun. Actually, I want to know where you can get a ZACP t-shirt. I think you can buy them from our website or very soon. So, Catherine, will you be chief whip?
Well, we haven't actually allocated those roles yet, but the whole idea of having a chief whip when you have 10 members of parliament seems kind of absurd, because the idea behind a whip is to really get people in line. And I think that we're highly unlikely to ever end up in that scenario. I think the most likely scenario in terms of our engagement in terms of parliament will be obviously at the point at which votes are taking place, then all of us are present. But at any given stage, I think it's far more likely to be the scenario that we will have one of us present in the National Assembly on any given day, while the rest of us are actually out working policy, which I think is a far more interesting way to be doing things. You consider the work is going to happen in the portfolio committees, and we want to be able to have maximum influence there. So yes, well, while you are whipping everyone else into line in the National Assembly, I'll probably be sitting in the back office and drafting our policy in terms of how we deal with, uh, pick a subject. Yes, we'll probably be doing all of those portfolio committees among us.
Absolutely. I think it's important to know that the speeches in Parliament are like the least important things that actually happen in Parliament. Being present for speeches is a bit ridiculous. But focusing on when a policy is proposed and voting on it, those are the important parts, and also the portfolio committees. Just a question: what is your take on South African downgrading the embassy in Israel? You have spoken about this, I think, on a few occasions, but if you want to repeat.
Yes, I think it's an absurd idea. And I think that the reason why I think it's an absurd idea is that it's going to actually end up costing us. If you take a look in terms of what's come out of the Trump administration over the past couple of days, they have said that they are going to exert diplomatic pressure upon anyone that doesn't deal favorably with Israel. Now, I'm not suggesting for a second that we should have an unprincipled approach to our engagement with Israel, but right now, we cannot afford to lose AGOA, which is the African Growth Opportunity Act, which allows everything produced in South Africa to enter the US duty-free. So if we are willing to actually gamble on the possibility of losing that by downgrading our presence in Israel, then by all means we should go ahead and do that. But I think it's an absurdly stupid thing to do. It's not in our self-interest, and enlightened self-interest is the cornerstone of our engagement with the rest of the world.
Cannot agree more. So a bit of a specific one: how can ZACP help small businesses? It's about removing the obstacles to your growth. It's about ensuring that you don't have to abide by nefarious laws that tell you who to hire and who to sell to, and all the rest of it. It's about ensuring that you're free to pursue your best interest as a business.
Yes, and I agree with Mr. Lakota, who says that if we buy oil from Saudi Arabia, we should not have a problem engaging with Israel. Absolutely right.
Quite. All right. For the moment, there is not. Oh, can you read the comments now? Okay.
Yes, I can read the comments now. I managed to work out how to do that. Of course, the fascinating thing was one of the reasons why I was keen on joining at this point, even though you guys have been going for a while,
Yes.
is I just like the idea of being able to pull over on the side of the road and whip out my laptop and join a live stream. I think that this is just really the way in which we take technology to the next level. As we speak right now, I'm at the intersection of Glen Hove and the M1 at the Shell service station, which is on the side, which you can see right there.
I think it's important to tell the people that we are not sponsored by Shell. It's not a paid promotion.
That is correct. We are not sponsored by Shell, and although we're very happy to accept their money if they want to give it to us,
if they ever approach us, sure. But
yes.
But I mean, this is sort of the democracy we're talking about, using technology to get out our message to people who are watching us. This thing about rallies at stadiums and town halls and going to some nasty community hall in some godforsaken place, it's becoming far more irrelevant.
Yes.
As a political game these days, we can reach millions of people just doing this.
Yes,
any way we want to. It's wonderful.
And shout out to Rene Pretorius, who says, really wish I could cast 5 votes for you. Well, I understand in some rural parts of the country that still happens for other parties, but thank you. We appreciate the sentiment.
What is your view on training the military? Do we need a good military?
Right now, if there's a single thing that I'm grateful for, it's that we have the most incompetent military in the world.
Yeah.
And it's what prevents us from becoming another Venezuela.
I used that argument 2 years ago, and I see everyone else is appropriating it.
Yes, but look, there are some levels at which I think having a military is important. I think that our Navy needs to be strengthened. And the reason why our Navy needs to be strengthened is that we have people from all sorts of places who are fishing in our economic exclusion zone.
Yeah.
And they are depleting our fish stocks. And people often ask what's our stance on environmentalism, and I think environmentalism really starts by having a protectionist attitude towards the livestock that we do have.
And property rights.
Exactly.
The
And
fish,
property rights.
the fish is ours.
The fish,
It's
yes.
national law.
Exactly. Yes.
And we can determine how much we can fish it or not because it's ours. Right. Any further questions? None that I can see. Anything to add, Captain?
No. Just again, Gopalong Lakota says, "I hope you have your hazards on." Well, actually, I'm very safely parked in a designated parking bay in the service station, so it's all good.
That's a question. How are we going to be updated? Are the listeners or followers going to be updated in policy meetings? Well, absolutely. That's why we started the YouTube channel, to have weekly updates as to the goings on in Parliament.
Well, yeah, minimum of weekly updates, we should say. So, because I think that certainly when things are, I mean, for example, on significant events, when, well, if we have a budget speech, for example, one would work on the assumption that we'll immediately be on this channel doing a response in terms of what we think are the appropriate courses of action from that point. But at very least, one of us at least will join every weekend without fail, probably on a Saturday morning. We'll always broadcast the time in advance. But the guaranteed feedback in terms of what goes on every week has to be part of what we are doing. It's the idea of accountability, taking it to the next level.
Yeah.
Right now with the other parties, you vote for them and you don't hear from them until the annoying SMSs start popping up 5 years later.
And just more of a comment, the ZACP is adopting the "if you market to everyone, you sell to no one" approach. And that is rather true. So people are saying we will never get popular because we don't appeal to the masses and we're not on every street poster everywhere. And I explain that we targeted people who would most likely approve of our principles, and therefore metropolitan areas, business owners, taxpayers, people like that. If you have a limited budget, you have to make sure it's effective, and that's what we have done.
Yes. Someone else asked, would you like actually want provinces to be more like states or cantons? I think, yes, that's in principle, absolutely. We are in favor of devolving power down to local communities as far as is possible. The interesting thing for us is going to be how we address the question of whether we end up setting up structures to participate in the municipal elections, because that's something that people have been asking us about quite frequently. And frankly, we're not yet at the stage where we've applied our mind to a policy framework that could actually work without diluting the essence of what we are as a party right now. But something that we've certainly discussed amongst ourselves, which we hope to flesh out at some point, is the whole idea of eventually starting something that's akin to a sort of franchise type model, because we really don't want to be running a political organization that extends down into the lowest levels of society. If we have a model where people basically sign up as really independent branches that are fit to craft their own policy, as long as they are all governed by a set of rules that comes down from head office, for want of a better word, but they become responsible for setting their own policy priorities at a provincial level, at a municipal level, and indeed at the level of a suburb. I think that actually is a business model that we should be looking at. That's entirely different from the way in which political parties currently get run. I mean, water shortages, for example, are a specific problem that might need to be addressed in a place like the Western Cape and the Northern Cape, but might not necessarily need to be addressed in a water-rich part of the country, like maybe Clarence in the Free State, which has, Lesotho Highlands feeding it all the time.
Yeah.
So those are clear examples of where priorities need to shift.
Yeah, and that's the important part of decentralization. It's about having contextual solutions to local problems instead of having a sort of a national solution to a problem that doesn't affect the nation, so to speak. Because there's a lot of unintended consequences with national solutions. which is a problem as well. I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but do you think the ANCification of the DA will ever be stopped? Do we care? Not really.
No, we don't care. I mean, the DA should be free to run as they see fit, and we'll run as we see fit.
Absolutely.
The other question that's just popped up: the unions are far too strong, and they're having a negative effect on our economy. What's the best way to break them up into a manageable level? Roman, you want to take that?
Well, I mean, there's a few ways to do it. Most importantly is to ensure that the state-owned enterprises, everyone is given a share within the state-owned enterprises as a citizen of South Africa, including union members. And what happens when you become owner of something? You take care of it. So union members will be incentivized to ensure that the company in which they have shares produces profits. And that is one aspect of not breaking them up, so to speak, but to give members a lot more skin in the game going forward.
Weeks ago, there was a petition to sell Northern Cape to Namibia because it's a desert. Oh, come on, guys. We'd be just getting silly at this point. No, I certainly don't think that it's a desert. It's been tested in terms of its viability for shale oil, and fracking always needs to be something that we leave on the table as an alternative in terms of how we address our energy requirements. Right now, I'm not in favor of fracking because it's not cost effective, just simply because fracking is not viable at a price point where oil is potentially going to be less than $50 a barrel, which is where it would be if not for the fact that Trump has pushed Iranian oil out of the market. But fracking should always be on the table as an alternative that's available to us, no matter how much some people get terrified at the idea of fracking in the desert.
Yeah, and David asked about our opinion of privatizing SOEs. I just sent him the media statement we put out, where we argue that every citizen in the country should get shares in the state-owned enterprises, well, because they own it anyway. I mean, the amount of taxes we pay to prop them up, it's only fair that they become shareholders in it as well.
Absolutely. So on that note, Raman, I will, now that we've ascertained that it's perfectly possible for us to do these broadcasts from a car pulled over at the side of the road, let's set that as a business model going forward. And I'll leave you to wrap up the conversation, and I'm going to head across to pick up my kid at school. And so just a reminder to everyone, please join us this evening if you're in Johannesburg at the Rand Club. Just remember that it's not a campaign meeting because campaigning is officially closed. We're just there to have a few drinks. It's a meet and greet scenario. Come along and chat to us, ask us questions, have a beer with us, have something non-alcoholic if you're so inclined.
Like
and yeah, look forward to seeing you.
All right, Mr. K, see you later. I'll finish up. All right, everyone. Well, thank you. That was not longer. This was supposed to be half an hour. It's gone now an hour and a quarter. So I'm going to finish it up there. I've got clients to meet and children to look after. So thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. If you're in Joburg, join us tonight. The link is in the first comment below. And otherwise, tomorrow, vote for the party that aligns with your principles the most. Hopefully it's us. If it's someone else, great. Just make sure that you vote and keep those, parasites in the parliament accountable. Thank you, everyone. Speak soon.